Come again, Michael. I was with you last Friday. It was the best day of my week. So hopefully this one becomes my best day of this week. When we have you today for how you've asserted your dominance with your HOA using serverless technologies, which is always exciting. Um, I'll let you introduce yourself and move it forward.
Awesome. Yeah, this could be a good time. Um, so asserting HOA dominance in my community with serverless, it's super interesting to me because this whole vibe of suburbanness is new to me. I didn't grow up in a suburban background, and that's sort of a central theme to a lot of my talks, is that folks get to know me on a personal level whenever they hear me speak. So to take you back a little bit, right? I am the second oldest of 13. I come from a large family. I like to say that I've been taking care of kids since I was a kid, which is a testament to the kind of environment that I grew up in. So I was happy when I got my first serverless house, right? I used my tech money to get my serverless house. And I'm going to share my screen to give you a little bit of insight into where I'm at these days. So let me just go ahead and share real quick. And I am trying to share this screen. So, to give you some insight, right? I mean, I got a bomb ass house, right? It's nice, right? You get the little like landscaping, the lighting. It looks nothing like any of the other houses in the neighborhood. We're loving it. The family's loving it. We get this whole idea of being able to sort of have our kids ride the bike inside of the street. And you don't have to watch for cars zooming by or at the very least cars zooming by, if not other things. I grew up in a different kind of environment. So as I was saying, right? Things change from how I grew up to what I'm now able to provide for my family, in the best way. I can't fault. I'm a very fortunate individual, but some of this stuff was culture shock. Right? I live in an area where it's an older generation. These houses were built in the 70s, and a lot of folks are in that 70s mindset, meaning that when they see a young, successful person who looks like myself join in the neighborhood, you don't always get welcome in the best sense. To the point where I had to tell my kids, you know, first and foremost, have fun, enjoy the neighborhood, but please don't be the ghetto black kids in the neighborhood. Like you can't. Go out there like you have some sense, and you have to represent the family. And I took that not just to them, but I had to take that to heart for myself. I needed a way to let folks know here I am. I signed a 30-year mortgage. I'm not going anywhere, right? And despite some of the sort of talks that happened in this community, this suburban community of mine, I need to let them know that my family was here to stay. Okay. Now, case in point, there was a couple moments when I was out watering the yard and folks would greet me and say, "Hello, welcome, how are you?" And I said, "I'm doing well." And they said, "Great. Do you happen to know the owners?" Right. Uh, or they would ask me, where do you work? Which is apparently a common thing to ask people in suburbia. Uh, you just say, where do you work? And I say, "Oh, I work at Amazon." And they say, "Oh, nice. Which warehouse?" Things like that happen. And you just do your best to correct them. But I wanted to let them know that Michael Liendo is here, everybody. Now, I'm a very tactical person when it comes to that. Right? I've tried not to be abrasive. I realize that you can't always pick your neighbors. And I needed a way to tactfully assert myself. So, one of the best ways that I knew to do it was the only common sense thing that there is to do, which is set up an AWS account, start creating websites on behalf of the community, and make sure that I built services of good to help each other. So I couldn't do that from the get-go. I needed to sort of worm my way into this. Now, at the very beginning, I wanted to be playful. So I said, you know what? Let me go ahead, and then now I'm going to share my screen once more, but get rid of the other info. I said, you know what? Let me go ahead and create a very silly application. Uh, Harmless, in fact. One of the cool things about living in this neighborhood is that everyone is on Facebook. It's a local community type vibe, right? That's just what you do. It's kind of cringe in our tech world, but it is what it is. So I was like, you know what? Let me show you folks like what I do. I work at AWS. I do this stuff in my sleep, and it's really simple for me to build out something fun for that so that folks can take advantage of it. So a word search is one of the first things that came to mind. I came up in here and I put out a nice little video and saying, you can have columns, you can have rows, and you can say things like something that they're definitely interested in, right? Um, like a bunch of cool people at AWS reInvent with serverless friends, right? And you can come in here, and the nice thing is that you can have words generated on your behalf, because the worst thing to do is to have sort of a word search where you have to then yourself find all the words. You can generate the grid. I'll pause here and sort of let all of you find folks search for certain words that you see in the word bank. But the idea was that I put in words for my neighborhood like community, pool, because we have a community pool, uh, volunteerism, acts of service, and all this stuff sort of popped in so that it's maybe a little bit of code switching, but at the same time, as I tell my kids, it's just being a chameleon. You're just blending in with your surroundings, and you're letting folks know that it's fine. We're just like everybody else, despite being one of three peoples in this entire neighborhood that looks like us. So this was phase one. Phase one was a massive success. I put it out on Facebook, and folks loved it. Who is this guy? Right? He's 30 years younger than all of us, uh, and he's here to have a good time. Cool. That wasn't good enough for me. Right? I didn't just want someone to bake me a pie and welcome me to the neighborhood. I wanted to sit at the top of this food chain, this suburban food chain. So I had to wait for my opportunity. And that came back on this Facebook group where someone had the idea that this is me again struggling to get this zooming off. Okay, I'm getting better. Um, Someone had the idea of posting on Facebook, hey, does anybody know of a contractor that does roofing? And the cool thing, again, about suburbia is that it's its own planet. Right? There's it's like its own ecosystem. It has its own gravity, and there are certain rules that folks know. There are probably 100 contractors at least in my city, but people will automatically nominate folks that live inside of our neighborhood first. You sort of get that community vibe. Again, which is why it's important for folks to know who you are and what you do so that you can be on this recommendation list. The first time caught my eye, thought it was cool, didn't think much of it. And then I said, what else is on here? So I start scrolling on this Facebook and I see people asking, does anyone have a babysitter that they recommend? Does anyone do lawn care? And I see this central theme of there is a question, and the answer is always someone within our own communal neighborhood. Now, I'm on phase two, right? So I'm ready to see what kind of solution I can provide for this. And fortunately, Amazon Bedrock came out with a really cool solution, which is essentially the ability to have information, proprietary information, sent to you, just like ChatGPT or anything else, except it's based off of your own knowledge bank. Super cool. I thought I'd give it a try. So that takes me to demo number two. And for that, I'm going to get really good at sharing and not sharing this session. There we go. And this one. And for that, we have to switch things over. Now, just to sort of close the loop on this one, I need to find serverless. There you are. And then if someone wanted to, then they could always come and print this grid out, and it prints out just the word bank and the words. So you sort of get that experience right there. But for the rest of it, we have this right here. Now, this is a very simple application from a visual standpoint, but there's a couple moving pieces going on behind the scenes. Okay. Now, I switched up the names and the services to protect those in my community, but this is exactly what I built, except I changed up the data set. Okay. So here's a chat interface, as a lot of us would come to expect, and I can ask it things like, hey, who provides or does anyone provide grass cutting services, right? And I'm going to purposely misspell that to see what it does, not because I can't type. And it's like, yeah, according to the information provided, like Michael Liendo offers grass cutting services, and I can give it context. Context are things like what is his contact info, right? And it just knows what I mean by his. And after a certain amount of time, maybe, baby, there we go. Um, Here's my contact info, right? I'll tell you all the information about my house, apparently, but I'll, gray out my phone number. Um, yeah, 555, all that good stuff. Here's this person about grass cutting stuff. Cool. What else do we have here, right? Actually, what does Kelsey provide? And after a short amount of time, we can see what pops up here. And cool. Actually, Kelsey, I don't know if you knew this or not, but you're really big into gardening and vinyl crafting, which is awesome. And you get this, you can't get this from ChatGPT, right? These are my own training data sets. And the question is, well, how do I build this? So to give you a little peek into what happened here, effectively, this is all taking place from a single CSV file. Okay? A bunch of folks in here already. And all I had to do was upload this CSV to Amazon S3. Now, the cool thing is that I have an API endpoint, which is then going to read this file and it'll read it on the fly. So anytime I update this, you know what? Actually, Kelsey, you're into gardening and vinyl crafts, sure, but I'm really going to emphasize the fact that you have awesome shirts. And Andres, making art is cool, but I don't know, Spanish, is that your, do you speak Spanish, Andres? Well, I don't shake your head like that. I didn't know. And Danielle, thanks for joining the call. Danielle is really good at, let's see here, providing community feedback. And for the email for Danielle, I'm going to put like, none of your business. Okay. So we're going to save this. And then this is effectively how I do it for my own neighborhood. I'm going to go to File, and we're just going to export it as a CSV. And inside of here, I can save this to my desktop and replace what's already there. This is important. And now back in my application, because I'm signed into this, I can click on Manage Data. You don't get to see that if you're just anybody. And from here, I can browse files, click on that CSV, and it gets uploaded to Amazon S3. Super, super cool. But you'll notice if I go back to my application and now I can say, who provides awesome community support? Right? Danielle wasn't there previously. And then now all of a sudden she shows up on the fly without any ingestion steps, without any vector databases. This is all done in a single step. Now, to give you some insight, like when I showed my community this, like I was a wizard. It was just like, how the hell are you doing this? First of all, I'm dealing with 50 to 70-year-old people generally in my area, right? So when you show them AI, it's like Terminator 1 is in theaters. It's like, what is this guy doing? Who do we allow here? There's a little bit of that. And you have to be cautious. So as I'm explaining it to folks, I have to let them know like it's you can't ask it like what are your banking details? It doesn't know that. Right? You have to break it down for them into steps that they can understand, not depending on age, but just depending on technical level. So there was that piece. But I wanted to take a moment to show you a little bit about the code that's happening inside of this. Uh, by first giving you the sort of breakdown from a simple diagram. Yeah. Oh my goodness. There we go. So essentially what's happening, and you saw this part from the UI, we have a simple chat interface, right? We have two users in place. We have the admin user, and then we also have sort of your generic anybody who can access this user. From a general perspective, it's simple. It's a Next.js application using amplified libraries. And honestly, the core services that they're interacting with are going to be the S3 bucket that needs to hold the files. And then you have an API, which is AWS AppSync, making a direct call to Amazon Bedrock via this JavaScript resolver. It looks and acts like a Lambda function, except you don't have to worry about creating a Lambda function. It comes out of the box. And then from an admin perspective, pretty much the same thing, except this time we have Amazon Cognito instead of the API. You still have to access that S3 bucket. Not too many moving pieces to get a very simple application out of the box. Now, this was great. And then from a coding perspective, I wanted to just sort of give you a little bit of insight into that direct integration piece, because this is the part which is like a Lambda function, but not. Now, one of my core philosophies is I don't want an AWS service that needs to talk to another AWS service. I don't want that communication happening via HTTP. It shouldn't have to leave AWS to go back to AWS. It just doesn't make sense to me, which is why I often omit the Lambda function. So in this case, I'm calling a retrieve and generate API. And this is the core of the application right here. It needs a config. How does it know what S3 bucket to go to? Well, I'm telling it. How does it know which AI model to talk to? Again, I'm telling it right here. And then lastly, how does it maintain context on the chat itself? Well, I give it a session ID. And the session ID is saying, if you give me one, great. Otherwise, sort of when you refresh the screen or when there isn't one there, then don't pass it. There's nothing to pass. Doing that, I return the response that it gets. It's going to be two things. The text, this is going to be the actual response that people care about, and then the session ID. And the idea is that as long as I pass in that session ID every single time, then it'll always remember the conversation as it's taking place. Sort of cliff note on that one. Session IDs are valid for 24 hours. After that, then they're pretty much gone, expired by the Bedrock team. This is cool. I'm going to be honest with you. I still wasn't satisfied. Like I needed more, like more power. Like that's what I needed. So at this time, the craziest thing happened. Uh, we have, it's going to sound weird even saying it. And I've rehearsed this like 10 times now. In the planet of suburbia, okay, there's this really weird thing called a home holiday walkthrough. All right, stay with me here. The idea is that folks can sign up, strangers, mind you, can sign up and to walk through people's homes. And the homes that they walk through are decorated based off of a holiday theme. We were Winter Wonderland this year. Now, I didn't know that it worked like this. Okay. So I didn't know that when people knocked on my door, if they even knocked, they would walk in, tour my home. And like the whole idea is just crazy to me because I'm like, I grew up in the ghetto. Like when strangers knocked on the door, we acted like nobody was home. And now strangers are knocking on the door and they come in and they're just trying to take it all in, right? And in my mind, I'm like, they're gonna take it all out. And it was just one of these weird moments where people you don't get taught that. Okay. So the home holiday walkthrough happens. I sign up because again, I need to. I need to be on the top of this chain. And uh folks come in and I realize two things are happening here. First and foremost, they have they had to get tickets, right? It cost $10. They had to get tickets. So they purchased them. They got a set of tickets. The tickets were never collected, and we never knew who had what tickets. So I don't know what purpose the tickets actually served because you never had to turn them in. And if you brought like five extra people with you, nobody really knew. So again, going back to the stranger danger thing, I'm like, what is this? Is this normal? Like somebody, I don't know if you guys know in the chat, like nod or something if this is normal. Otherwise, uh, I feel a sense of camaraderie. So the event gets done. It's great. And I realize something has to change. Now I've created two applications at this point, right? First one was just a little word search. The second one was practical. It was the sort of service finder. Now we're dealing with money. Now we're dealing with real users and recurring events. That was only one example of several events that we had. So how do we fix this debacle? I think from a technical perspective, we need payments. Stripe all day, every day. Right? It's just what we use. We need a way to have folks sign up. Stripe can also handle that with your like little user information, but the core thing is we needed a unique ticket. Okay? Now, on my end, it wasn't much of a challenge. Essentially, you sign up and you get your name. Your name, you pay for a certain amount of seats, and then from there, we have a ticket emailed to you with your name on it. Cool. I can't show you that part because the ticket also has the neighborhood information, but let me walk you through what this flow looks like. And then share. Here. Hold on, buddy. He needs to go outside, but he ate my burger today, so he can wait. Uh, so we had this simple Stripe checkout. Easy peasy. We're going to be dealing with a single page site, right? It's a little hero page with like a little purchase button and then some more general information at the bottom. Here are some considerations that we have. The interesting thing is that as opposed to the other applications that I built, none of the API AWS stuff is happening on the front end. They just see like a boring ass web page. All this other stuff is where it's taking place. They log in with Stripe. Inside of Stripe, now we're going to hit up a Lambda function because we're in a webhook. And then from there, you can go to S3 to get the, in this case, we're going to say MP3. But you can imagine it could be a ticket from the S3 bucket, a file, essentially. And then I need to email that to the user. Again, in my neighborhood, if you were trying to implement this, they're saying, cool, how much is that plugin going to cost? Right? How much is that service or that SaaS application going to be per month? I'm like, guys, this is free. This is easy. So what does that look like from a practical standpoint? Well, let's dive in here. I'm going to go to, what are we at? 3001. All these projects are open source, by the way. And in this case, I'm going to get the song. You can see I'm kicked over to Stripe. Let's bump this up a little bit. There we go. Put in my email. Oh, my shortcut doesn't work. And then we can do the typical like 402s, right, for Stripe. Some date in the future is good for me. 05, let's just do 25. And for the address, like you don't already know it, but oh well. Let's just pick up some random place. And then I want to get sort of my email side by side with you because I'm all about sharing my personal details apparently in this session. I just realized. So let's go with, I know it's going to be sent to my junk folder. So let me go here and then we'll just sort of put it like right next to the page. You can see it come in. Now you can see some test emails at 12:33. I know it's kind of small, but we'll double click on it in just a second. The key thing is that when I click on play, what do we have? 128 my time. I know it's small, but you should see two like emails pop up. And that's just because I have this webhook set up for two events. 128 is the first one, and then there is the email. Now, the reason why I have two is because there are two things that I want to show you. First and foremost, how do we send this item in my S3 bucket as an attachment? You can see like the actual PDF isn't listed here. This is an attachment. Okay. And then for the other part, how do we take a different item from my S3 bucket after they've paid and send it directly inside of the body of the email? Now, the reason this is showing up in my junk folder for folks that may not be aware is because I'm in the sandbox mode for this session. My actual production account will let you send it to any email. And again, like this was a really easy way to come out as the hero. My neighborhood is now thinking like there is nothing this guy can't do, but just you wait because there's more. But they're thinking like there's like who is this guy? Like honestly, like he is revamping our neighborhood and bringing us up to modern times. Now, when I say modern times, I mean like they're in the Stone Ages with some of this stuff, folks. It's embarrassing. But let me show you what I'm talking about here. Let me get back to a single pane. And what I have is the current website. Okay, so this is the current website for my community in my area, right? Windsor Crest Club sounds like fancy. It's really not. But the whole idea is that they have a WordPress blog. Okay, nothing wrong with that. Powers most of the web, right? Um, Super old. It has serifs, ew. And if you go down here, you just have general information about the area that I live in. The problem is that when you go to things like members only, it's like, whoa, 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 pause. We need to authenticate. And here's the core issue of what like set me off on this journey. This password that I put in is not unique to me. It is shared amongst the 700 people in my neighborhood and those that used to live in my neighborhood and have now moved on. Like nobody's actually checking this thing, right? What's in this area by chance? Why doesn't Michael put in the password and show me? It's because it's what's driving the reason for my neighborhood services list. Because you have 15-year-olds that live in the neighborhood and they want to babysit and they have a cell phone from mommy and daddy. And now you have a minor's cell phone that anybody can access, whether or not they're a member of our city, right? And these are things, again, uh, maybe not so because of an age situation, but maybe a testament to the times. Like 30 years ago, right? I mean, take that back 20 years ago. I could go to the store and buy alcohol and cigarettes for my parents, right? 30 years ago, it was not weird to give somebody your address and just be like, yeah, visit me anytime. The oddest thing I have in building out a lot of these services is the fact that they are more opposed to giving out their email address than their home address. And it's just a generational thing. I don't know. I don't know. Uh, but in my discussions, the hardest thing about this technology has been discussing it and teaching folks from a technical perspective that it's not harmful, that it's not costly, and then at the same time, do away with maybe some of your older mindsets and embrace the new, right? But yeah, I would never give out my address as opposed to my email address. In any case, behind this portal, a lot of that stuff lives there. I was like, okay, now I'm still ambitious. I'm like, I could totally redo this website. I could bring in authentication. I could bring a new blogging platform because how they do it is that they have the content here, and then they have the newsletter on MailChimp, and then they have forms through another provider. And it's all sort of SaaS stitched together, right? I mean, a lot of us have seen that where a SaaS company will just stitch together other SaaS products. So what did I do? I came in here and I was like, you know what? Forget windsorcrestclub.com. We're going to windsorcrestclub.org. And I was like, I'm totally going to just like recreate this website and make it better than it was before. So this is my failed attempt. And the reason being is sort of to back up and give you the overview. I took us off of WordPress. WordPress was costing $300 a year. Okay. I was like, forget it. We can save that money. And and I said, I can go in and propose an idea. They said, sorry, Michael, the only people that can sort of submit their ideas and have them etched out need to get approved by the board. And because you're so new, I don't think that a lot of people are going to vote for you, which was like a shady way of saying what I think they were trying to say. Um, so then I said, okay, cool. How does one get on the board? So, Michael, I mean, elections aren't going to happen for another 3 weeks. Okay. And the only spot we have open is for communications. Cool. So I ran for communications board 2 months after living here, after creating 3 applications, and I won. I won because people knew me, right? They knew the work that I did, and I felt like communications was the way to go. So now I am chairman of my neighborhood board. I oversee communications, which is very much so like an API because I have to interact with different responses from my neighborhood and I just feed them data. Now I have the insight to all the API keys and the WordPress stuff so I can transfer over these documents myself. Funny enough, some of you might recognize this layout because it is really just a hash node site. I'm using headless hash node. You can see some of the issues that I'll get into in just a moment. But this is a hash node blog. You can even see like the hash node logo that I haven't updated. You can come down here. It does support images and all that good stuff. As I mentioned, this is headless. So a Next.js site using the hash node APIs. And then now I can sort of have full control. And the reason why I say this is a failed attempt is because a lot of time went into building this. It, this is volunteer work, by the way. This is just my neighborhood doing stuff. And whenever someone needed a new post, from a development perspective, I say, cool, I'll get that out to you, next week, next Wednesday. How's that work for you? And they're like, Michael, what are you talking about? Like, I need this out in like 2 hours. And I never realized that these people, I say like I'm not part of them now, uh, the folks in my neighborhood have grown dependent on what I do. So much to the fact where during my full-time job, during my time as a husband or my time as a dad, I don't have the time. And if I do, maybe I don't have the ambition to do this. And I start to backtrack a little bit and realize that I spent so much time focusing on the technical aspects. I never realized the human aspects that I was sort of pushing to the side. So I call this was my failure. This was my learning moment because they had a system that worked for them. I just came in as the overconfident new guy to say, let's just do this a better way. And they were like, oh, yeah, that's all. I'm on board for that. Better is great. What they didn't realize is that better meant change, better meant different, right? Better meant learning. And honestly, like when I'm 70, I'm not trying to learn anything from like a 30-year-old. I'm just not. Right? And that's the reality of things. So how does this all tie into to serverless? Right? I was able to create 3 AI applications uh, without ever having done this for a user base before, right? I mean, I'm a developer advocate. It's what I do. I build out prototypes, but I needed to take these out off into production. Uh, Serverless allowed me to fail and fail cheaply. Right? I didn't have to set up services or EC2 instances or servers and all that other good stuff. I was able to spend pennies at most. I guess my bill hasn't come out yet, but soon. $2.20 in building out all of these services, experimenting, getting things wrong, etc., without having to break the bank. Serverless also made me realize there's a legitimate human factor to building out applications. Too many times as engineers and developers, we say, I could build something out like that in a couple of days, no problem. But explain that to your significant other, how you're going to spend a couple of days doing something when the system is already working as is. They're using Excel sheets, they're writing checks and all this other stuff, right? In-person payments. And I say, well, I mean, if you just adjust to this 3.5% Stripe tax, your life will be significantly easier. 3.5%? Are you kidding me? Nobody's trying to pay that. These are normal people in your neighborhood. Not everybody comes from a technical background. And if it wasn't for serverless, we wouldn't be able to have these discussions. It would be cost prohibitive to do so. So there is, if I had an end slide, that would be my end slide. I'm happy to answer questions and go over any of the code that you saw here. Again, I'm not anti-Lambda, but I am like pro using the right tool for the job. So if you want to see how I'm doing things without a Lambda function, I'm happy to go into that. But in any case, thank you for your time.
Good stuff. It's one thing that's very interesting to me is the app sync portion, right? Is you usually relate app sync to GraphQL and all that. You didn't even do anything with GraphQL and what you were talking about, but maybe indirectly to store some information. But what you showed us was basically a proxy to an AWS service, right? A secure proxy with IAM. So that's pretty cool and goes to because as you know, I've been learning AppSync. It's not just to load data and mutate data, and that it's literally an entry point to AWS for you in a secure manner. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, AppSync has the direct integrations that AppSync has makes your life tremendously easier than API gateway or step functions even. Now there are some trade-offs as always, but with the real-time subscription support and the JavaScript resolvers, that I like what you said. That is the way to stay within the AWS ecosystem when you're just trying to stitch services together.
Cool. And how long did it take you to dominate your community? Right. So you
Um,
mentioned that you applied as the communications director, I'm going to call it, 2 months after you moved in. But how long was, I guess, was it 2 months where you did all this?
it was add one more to that. So I put my hat in the basket 2 months after, and then 1 month of I'm gonna call it like campaigning, but really it's just walking my dog, picking up his poop, and letting like waving at people as I do so, like, hello, how are you? And that's another thing that you do in this neighborhood. You got to pick up your dog poop, but whatever.
Were you doing like the presidential kissing babies in the forehead and stuff like that?
It was more like petting their dogs and giving them biscuits. So I mean, maybe that's the equivalent.
Yeah,
But yeah, there was some honest trying to be elected there.
cool. I mean, 3 months is summing it up. It's pretty, it's not that much time, right? And you mentioned you built three three applications, right? You did the word search thing, and then now you're moving. Well, you're backtracking from the website, right?
Yep.
Because you said, "Hey, it works. Why do I spend my free time on it?"
So there's a healthy middle ground. The biggest thing is that user management is a key factor here. So when folks sign in, for example, the home holiday walkthrough, or maybe paying your dues, the HOA area would like to know who's doing that or give them like an online version of doing that. The problem is that WordPress is plugin based and theme based. So the plugin is $69 a month. I was like 16, like sometimes I think I'm in the wrong field. Like 70 bucks a month per person to just have someone sign in with an email when I could build that in 2 minutes for free. It's crazy to me. But that's the price you pay when you deal with the ecosystem and not having to deal with code, right? And some folks are happy to do so. So the healthy middle ground that I found is let them do all their public facing stuff on WordPress. And when it comes to the few areas that need authentication, I can create those as separate applications under the single Cognito user pool. Then
Cool.
Danielle, you got a comment? Can I link to the three applications in source code? Absolutely.
Yeah, and we'll add
Absolutely.
that into. There's going to be a recording out, so we'll add it to the notes there. So
Cool.
it's accessible. We'll open a bunch of pull requests and complain and make fun of your code.
It's good with me. Here you go. So the caveat here is that anything under my MT Liendo repo is sort of whip. Like it's all working, but it's not gonna have a README. And it might have like console.logs and stuff like that. Anything under my focus.org is pretty much done. And it typically has a blog post and a YouTube video accompanied with it.
Nice. That's kind of my equivalent of private versus public repos, where I just keep them
I
hidden.
feel bad because as a DA, like when I make stuff private, I'm like brother,
Ugh.
um, but yeah, those are the repos. And as you mentioned, you include those in the show notes.
And for joining us, Michael. That's very interesting stuff. I mean, we hit on some technical points on a lot of non-technical points, so it's pretty cool.
That's me. That's me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I'll chat with you all later.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody. Good one.